right, you're rolling.
Okay.
It's the finance meeting 28 October 2020.
Make sure I got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. There's 10 of us, including you.
Okay, sounds right. I'm going to use the mic. Thank you all for coming. I hope you could hear me. I believe you all have the agenda for this meeting. And on the agenda, we have the previous minutes will be read later because Jean Dowling is coming later and she has the minutes. We've had a lot of meetings and we've come to the point that we're going to vote on the budget. All of you either have had it from before. If you don't have it now, just ask me. I brought extras. We're not voting on it this minute. Take a look at it again. But the bottom line as it stands right now is $2.71 increase. Now, I think we all know that the budget has to go through us, the officers committee, the executive board, and also the delegate assembly. Whether it makes it through everything or not, because right now, we really don't know for sure if all those groups are going to be available. What I did, though, is I contacted Guy Strum. Guy Strum is our new outside auditor. When we had the last meeting, I indicated that we would have the audited report for 2019. Well, we have it physically. It's a draft. I forwarded not to everybody. I forwarded it to George and Americo, basically because they're both CPAs. And it's a very long and intricate report. It's presented in a different fashion because in 2019, there was the most major change in accounting for audited statements in 30 years. I'm going to try to proceed and get Guy on the phone now, and I'm going to try to use the microphone with my phone. So if you can't hear him, please come forward. He would have been here, but, you know, first of all, he's far, and second of all, the virus. So, yes. The best laid plans of mice and men. thought we set up for 1:15, you may be on the phone. Please call us back. We have a group here and we want to hear from, we have a group here, we want to hear from you. And also, you're going to be on the phone and on the mic, so when you call, could you put your phone on speaker? Thank you. This is Ed. Okay, we shall move along.
You want the door closed?
Yeah. The next item on the agenda is a review of the prior period reserves. Now, we have and I have talked about the mechanics of the reserves, how they're formed, and what we really should be doing. So I handed everybody a package, and that package has reserves going back to 2013. So anybody who doesn't have that package, let me know. This is the package. The first thing says, United Civic Organization Reserve History. Should be in here.
Everything else is.
Yeah, right here. Now, what I did, and you had the top sheet before, and it was netted out. But this time, I went back, I couldn't find all the old reports, but I went back, and the first report that should be on top was for December 31st, 2013. And that's a very significant year for us at Century Village. Not many items on the reserve, 3. And it starts with, as of 2012, the total amount in the reserve account for Century Village was $3,575.
37,000.
37,000, I reduced it, 37,575. And how that came about, just to refresh everybody, the roads were being done. The reserve amount in the road account was insufficient to pay for the roads. And let me say, at that time, we had dedicated reserves, if George will remember, and the reserves for all the items were in separate accounts. Now, what happened is, Mr. Black emptied all the accounts in order to pay for the roads, which we wound up paying in 2012. And all was left was $37,575. I want us to look at the additions at that time. $166,668, which gave us a total of $204,241. I think that started the trend, because having paid for everything, that's all we had in the reserves. Every comment on all the prior reports, and that's what I'm trying to eliminate for 2020. If you read that comment, it's very important. An independent study to determine the adequacy of the current funding program for the replacement and deferred maintenance of association common areas has not been conducted. In October 2013, the Board of Directors conducted its own study and estimated the remaining useful life and the replacement costs of common property. Now that comment goes right through 2019, and I brought to the attention of Mr. Strum that in my opinion, the wording is wrong. Because it wasn't the Board of Directors who didn't do a study, it was the officers, and then they brought what they thought should be the reserve to the Board of Directors who voted on it. And that's the way it really is today. That comment is a very, very strong weak point. And as we go, and if you turn the pages slowly, what you're going to find is items are added to the reserve and subtracted from the reserve, and very little explanation. What happened here is we started with 204,000, and you don't see anything for the additions. And that's the correct presentation, because the way UCO operates, any representation that we have or had as to what's in the road reserve, what's in the irrigation reserve, is a mirage. You could put any number there because it really is meaningless. Because at this point and that point, we don't have dedicated reserves. And to reiterate it, we have pooled reserves. And a pooled reserve means that even if you had $10 million in a reserve account for the roads, it doesn't have to go to the roads, and it doesn't have to go to the delegates for approval. It is there just to give you an idea. And we have that up until today. And if you look at the schedule, you look at the last number item and it says pooled reserves. And that really is the proper representation, because the money that went into the reserve account really isn't defined. Okay. You have two things there: a transfer in, which was money, and an addition of $1,512,000, giving you a total of $1,805,118. If we move forward, you're going to see an amazing change. Turn to the next page. The next page is 2015. This is the same exhibit that appears in every single audited report. And if you notice, there was nothing presented as an addition for, it says required funds per budget. But that number is a total number. And all of a sudden, which we never had before, we have that may be it. Hold on, guys. Hold that thought. Guy? Okay, I'm going to, as you heard, I have 2 microphones in front of me. And we've tested it. If you talk up, everybody will be able to hear. So we lost them. Guy, we lost you. Are you back?
I'm here.
Okay. We have here, how many people? 10? However, everything we're doing is being recorded twice on camera. I introduced you in your absence. So what I want, and I explained that we only have a draft, and I want to turn the mic over to you and let you enlighten what you want to say. So I can introduce everybody, but I think everybody's time, not ours especially, but yours is valuable. So go right ahead and let's see if we can hear you.
All right. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Can you hear everybody?
Yes.
Okay, we can hear you.
Okay. Well, hi everyone. My name's Guy Strum. First of all, let me thank you all for the opportunity to provide this service for you this year. It was quite a learning experience, I think, for both of us, all of us involved. And at the end of the day, I'm pretty happy with the results of where we were, and I have some comments coming up in a letter that I'm working on for you for some improvements on where we can go. But as far as where we are, in terms of the financial statement, the mechanics, without getting into some of the deeper mechanics just yet, the financial statement itself looks good. You've got about $7.5 million in your reserves. You've got about $3 million in cash on your operating side in CDs, but you're a little overdrawn in your bank. So you have about $1 million net in operating fund, but a lot of it's tied up in CDs. So that's something we need to look at going forward as well. There's really nothing else that's that exciting on your balance sheet other than your cash. And of course, there is the revenue from the cable contract, which you're earning as we go. Ed and I also went through the property and equipment and cleaned that up. Most of what was still listed under property equipment was either old and gone or old and fully depreciated. A lot of it's stuff that probably should have never been capitalized in the first place. Probably should have just been expense when you bought it. But so what we're left with in property and equipment is pretty much just the building and the land that it sits on. With the building being depreciated and the land just sitting there at cost of about $10,000, $11,000, which is probably worth a lot more at this point. But we leave land at cost. Your income statement, again, nothing that exciting other than the biggest item on the statement of revenue is an adjustment, a prior period adjustment that had to be posted of about $500,000, which in prior years was recorded as the expense that has already been incurred, but in prior years that expense was the expense. The expense was the cost that you paid to get the cable contract. And in the prior year it was booked as a prepaid expense, and it was being written off over the life of the contract. I don't believe that's right. That money that you paid to that consultant is an expense that's gone and forgotten and has no future benefit. So we just went ahead and wrote that prior prepaid expense off as an expense. Didn't have any effect on your current operations, but it did have an effect on your overall fund balance, which is why part of the reason why your overall fund balance is in a little bit of a negative position right now. And do you want to go through these footnotes? Is there anything in particular in these footnotes you want me to hit on? Because
I think I started with the basic one as far as the net presentation on the 606, which is a major change. And then also I'm working on the reserves and trying to explain that we have pooled reserves, and in prior periods, they were reflected in different accounts, which really doesn't mean anything because anything can be taken out of it. We have, so everybody knows, there's 37 questions that we as management have to answer, that we represent what we represented as correct to the auditor. The auditor has a few major, I consider major, comments. I'm not looking at it now. We reviewed it the other night, but while it's been mitigated in the comments, I'm bringing it up again, that since March of 2019, because of an error, $600,000 was put in accounts that are limited in any one bank to any one company of $250,000. So I believe the number, without looking, is that we were uncovered for $432,000 from March of 2019 up until 2 weeks ago. What Guy noted is, fortunately, we didn't have a loss. And we're taking steps now. That money has been moved out as of 2 weeks ago. And we're taking steps that that shouldn't happen again. Guy, is there anything else, that you want to bring to the people's attention? And then I'll ask if anybody has any questions.
Well, these footnotes are all stuff that, other than the 606 issue, which I'm happy to expand on if anyone has a question about that. And these footnotes, you all as the officers certainly know the information in here, and then the letter that is referring to is representing to me that this information is correct, because I'm just writing the information for you. These are your footnotes, really. So if anyone has any questions on the footnotes or on the financials as a whole, I'm happy to answer it. And then when I finish up my internal control letter in the next couple of days, then we'll have something else to discuss going forward, which perhaps is even more important at this point.
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead, Guy.
Does anyone have any questions I can answer?
I think that,
George.
I'd like to hear a little bit more about the.
Can you talk into the mic?
About the.
I'm introducing you to George Lowenstein, who was the former president of Hugo Century Village, the former treasurer, and a very young CPA.
Thanks for the compliment. Okay, Guy,
I'll bring you a mic so he can
I have a mic. Can you
talk a
hear me?
little louder to
Is
it.
the mic on?
Is it on? It doesn't sound like it's on.
Okay, guys. How do you
No,
hear me?
it's not in the right place.
Okay, tell me how to turn it on.
I'll give you a live mic.
No, okay.
Is this on?
No.
It sounds
No.
like it's on, okay, it's not on. I don't see the, I don't know what the button is. I don't know.
Slide it forward.
Ah, it's
Okay.
on now.
Yeah.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Guy, would you expound a little bit on the FASB 606? The reading I get out of it is that the income is capitalized until such time that you have a corresponding disbursement.
Were you able to hear that, Guy?
No, it's kind of cutting in and out a little bit.
Okay, to repeat, I'd like a little more discussion on FASB 606. From my reading your note, I get the idea that the assessments are capitalized until such time as you have a corresponding disbursement or expense. And do I have the right interpretation?
Yeah, except for one word. You use the word capitalize. I would substitute deferred. So yes, the assessments are deferred because because it's a liability as opposed to an asset. So the
Okay, but it would show up on the balance sheet.
Until you spend it.
So it would show up on the balance sheet.
So, right. So rather than going in prior years, as you assess the reserves, it went straight to equity. It went straight to income, straight to equity. Now it goes straight to liability or deferred revenue. Until you spend it, then it goes to revenue.
And that's only for the reserves?
Correct. Special, because what the powers that be have determined, and I didn't agree with it. You have operating funds, special assessment, and reserve. So operating funds is a continuous thing. So
Correct.
The money is just spent as it is earned as it comes in on a continuous basis.
Right.
Special assessments were always accounted for this way. Special assessments are always recorded as deferred revenue until you spend it. So those two things didn't change even under the new 606. But they said that replacement funds, which were always done like an operating fund, is now supposed to be done like a special assessment fund.
Okay, so now,
And I personally don't agree with it because replacement fund money under a condo specifically or a homeowners association is not going back to anybody. So
right,
why is a liability beyond me? But people smarter than me decided.
okay, tell me, what does the special assessment accounts come by? What do you consider special assessments?
You don't have any.
It doesn't come into play.
For you, no.
Okay, we don't have the ability to assess. Okay, statutorily, we don't have a authority to assess in the middle of the year. We assess once a year when we approve the budget, and that's it.
Are you referring to this, the footnote?
I'm basically referring to the statement you just made when you talked about the different funds, the operating fund and then the special assessment fund. And I'm saying to you, what is the special assessment fund, since to my knowledge, UCO does not assess anything other than at the beginning of the year when their budget is passed. But once the budget is passed, I don't know that they ever or even can make an assessment in the middle of the year. Because that's very unwieldy, because it's going to be against the associations, who then are going to have to assess the individual unit owners for that money. And if the association doesn't pass it, what good is it to try to make an assessment? So for practical purposes, there's never an assessment in the middle of the year.
Are you referring to a specific footnote?
Yeah, I'm referring to your footnote of FASB 606.
Yeah. I think we're getting, I'm not trying to cut you off, George. I think that this is
But
a,
you always have the power to assess, and you always have the power to amend your budget
when you look at
at
it.
any point if you don't have enough money.
I'll do it after
You
this.
can't, you're going to a deficit.
What I'm gonna say now,
I'll let you go back and read through the footnote and see what you're referring to.
Okay.
what I'm gonna say now, Guy, is when you complete the audit, right now we have a draft and your letter, I will print it up, we'll have another meeting, and everybody will get a copy of the completed audit so that any questions would be more meaningful. In actuality, we're supposed to have the annual audit available to any unit owner. But I think it's an advantage if we have the preparer like you going through it, because I'm willing to make you a major bet that very few people, A, look at it, and fewer people read the footnotes, especially now with the volume. But I think it's important because it gives everybody a better idea of what's happening. Does anybody have any other idea?
No.
we thank you and look forward to get the completed audited report. I did pass out the tax returns, but I myself found this a very interesting group of comments which we didn't have, and observations that we didn't have before in the prior reports. And hopefully if the virus abates, we can get you down here in person, and if we have a delegate assembly, that would even be better. Anybody else have anything? I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'll look forward to it if we get through this virus already.
I think we all want that. Anybody else? Guy?
Well,
Again,
Yes, sir.
thank you, and look forward to the report and another meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
Talk to y'all soon. Stay safe.
Right. I'm going to take a second here. We got cut off from America, and I want to get him back on again. Quite frankly, and I didn't want to cut him off, but that 606 that George was talking about, as I mentioned, is the most significant change in accounting in 30 years. And while he said Guy says he's not in agreement with it, and George will vouch. We lost you, but you're back on again, okay?
Yeah, because I didn't hear a damn thing from, Guy.
We'll have the whole thing for you. What happened is, Olga's phone.
Carry on.
Okay,
Don't worry about it. Carry on.
we're carrying him on. Okay,
okay, Ed,
yeah,
you were talking about the reserves.
right,
And I think when we looked at this, one of the notations was that the board of directors evaluated the reserves.
right.
Okay, wasn't the board of directors.
That, I'm saying it was not the board of.
Right, and that's
I'm saying it's
corrected.
the officers.
Right, but Guy has it written down as the directors, and so you have to get him to change that.
I did talk to him on that, and there were a few other items where it said the board of directors, and I think that comes from those associations that only have, all they're under is 718, and they're not attached to 617, and I think that makes the difference. But,
The difference is what actually happened.
right,
Okay,
so that is a change.
right.
And I was getting to the point that if you go to, and I think we were up to 2015, where we went from absolutely basically nothing to an extended schedule. And everything is applied. And there's no doubt that's wrong. And as we go along, you will see that the estimated remaining life changes from year to year, and it really isn't on any mechanical basis. It is sort of like, what do we need to make this balance? And I don't have 16, but if you go to 17, 17, we added our other major item, which is irrigation piping, 7 million. I mentioned this before, but I wanted to bring it out again. The 7 million and the 15 million have been done without any real studies. And it could be more or less, and the useful life could change dramatically. And if you look at 17, it says the estimated remaining life is 26 years on 15 million. And in 18, on the top, the useful life went from 26 years to 10 years. And in 19, it changed too. And I brought this up before because in an effort to get this more in line, I think I mentioned to you that we engaged federal engineering to do an initial study of the roads. It came back and it said we only have 2 years of useful life. I then went back to federal engineering per Mr. David Israel and said we would like to get an analysis by your engineer going through the village carefully. What areas would you recommend to do immediately, or what areas you would recommend to do over a period of time? The original estimate came back over $3,000, $3,020. I went back because the gentleman who walks the village was walking it with me. So I went back and I asked him if we provide him with a golf cart, it should cut down his walking time, and we just got it yesterday. They acknowledged it, and from $3,020, they feel they could do the same and equal job for $2,020 because of the golf cart expediting his movement, and he's going to go through every street in the village. The only thing we got to do is get our golf carts working. I also reached out to try to get an irrigation company to give us an estimate. I attended last week the expo, which was down in the village, which had many vendors. There were about 8 irrigation companies. I spoke to them all. I left them my card, I got their card, and supposedly they're going to get back. One of the problems we had is some of these irrigation companies know Century Village, and it's a costly job to do a detailed engineering study of irrigation. And one or two very openly said, we've tried to get work here, we can't. All we would ask is if we do this study, that when you have a request for irrigation work, to be included on those companies that are bidding on the job. I also asked them, it's very nice about doing big jobs, would you be available to come in and do small jobs? Quite frankly, not everyone said they would be willing to do that. So that cut it down.
All that information really should be in the office, because we've had things like that before in the
I
past.
can't hear you talking to the microphone.
I said, all that information should be in the office, since we had all those things in the past, as far as irrigation and everything else.
No, you didn't.
Turn your mic on.
Put your mic on, I'm sorry.
Everybody please turn their mics on.
I'm sorry, the only report we have was done in 2016. It was done for nothing, and I called that company to come back in and redo it, and they said no. So,
Well, I don't really understand why all that information is not in the office. We've had things like that done, in the past.
I can't, listen, if it's there, I would love to get it, but it's not
Well,
there.
I don't know what happened to it, that's for sure.
Okay.
Okay.
I'd like to,
Ed, I have a question.
sure,
Okay, my question is, on the 2015, under roadway resurface,
Right.
the estimated useful life is 15 years. And if you look at 2015 and 17,
It's
it's
20.
pushed up to 30 years.
No, the estimated life is 30
Useful
years.
life
Hold it.
is
But
30.
the significant number is the estimated remaining useful life.
I understand, it's double. It
Yes.
was 13 2 years before, and now it's 26.
Well, what I was trying to tell you, and if you read the comments, Phil, this was just done without any research and moves around to accommodate what was available or wanted to be put in the reserves.
I can understand that, Ed, but when I was in business and my accountant supplied me with information on useful life
Right.
prepared by the federal government for every office equipment and so forth and so on, and that's the schedule I had to go by.
This was not, all these estimates were not prepared by the accountant. If you read the note,
Right, I
it
understand.
was supplied to all, and there's 3 different accountants that worked in this period from 2010 to 2019.
So they just randomly pick numbers, is what
I
you're saying?
can't account for what I wasn't there. I went to, in recent years, 1 or 2 budget meetings. And this is strictly my opinion, and you have some office. Yes,
Okay.
yes. And there's no documentation behind this. And that's what we really should have.
Mhm.
Hi, Gene. Good to see you. Unfortunately, you missed the accountant, but you'll hear more.
Oh, I thought we were starting at 2.
I know that. I'm glad you came.
No, I said I thought we were starting at 2.
Oh, no.
Okay.
I thought you had a problem getting here before 2, if I'm not mistaken. Okay. But the accountant, we had to bring on early to accommodate him. But all his detail is on 2 different tapes. At this point, I want to wrap it up by saying, I recommend that we go through with that second federal engineering study to outline what could extend the useful life. And 2, that we pursue getting an irrigation company to come in and give us a fresh and more detailed study. These are 2 big items. Anybody have any questions at this point?
It's not a question, but I remember when the engineer was here.
Can you make it?
Sorry about that. I remember when the engineer was here, he made a statement that even if we do the roads and go down to the very bottom, after 2 years, we will begin to see cracks in the road.
True.
Okay? Now, I have a very strange idea about that, and it should be brought up at an operations meeting, but I can't go there. So I'm gonna have to speak up now. Has anybody thought about just redoing, not redoing the roads, but just maintaining them? Last time it cost $100,000. If you spend $100,000 or even $200,000 each year just repairing the roads, it'll be a long time before you reach $5, $6, $7, or $8 million. And I don't know whether this is a possibility, but I think it should be looked into. Thank you.
The answer to your question, Olga, your remark is, that's what I was just talking about, having the engineer come and do a detailed study of those areas that should be fixed immediately and down the road rather than hodgepodge.
Yeah, but this would eliminate having the roads done all at once. In other words, just doing it a little at a time as repairs,
The answer
as
is,
emergency repairs.
The answer is, if you recall, we weren't supposed to do all the roads at one time.
I know that was done.
Okay,
We-
however, it certainly can be done by quadrants or something else. The reason I feel that we should have these people in and point to it, because I think it will extend the useful life.
Let me explain something. What you're doing is you're discussing doing the roads, the whole roads as quadrants. What I'm discussing
No,
is
no.
doing repairs.
No,
Are we on the same page
No.
or not?
you were on the same page as me. My page was to do an extensive study on repairs, do the repairs
Right.
so you could extend
Okay.
the life.
I just want to be sure that we're on repairs rather
I,
than
just for
redoing.
those people who weren't here when the engineer was here,
Yeah.
the original engineering report, which is available to everybody, gave us two options. One, to do another overlay, and two, to go down right to the bottom. And the engineer gave you those two options and told you, if you do A, it won't last as long. If you do B, it'll last longer. But I think the salient point that he made was, if you scraped it all the way down to the bottom, in 2 years or so, you will have reflective cracks because the original road, the right size stones weren't put in, and also the nature of the ground in Florida, that it's soft and it moves. But this is definitely an attempt to extend the life by doing repairs, and the budget reflects that. If you look at it, I think we talked about it, leaving a large amount to do the repairs. Anything else? All right, I'd like to move along. I have another topic which we discussed before. We discussed the reserves, we discussed the investigation costs. And that while people thought, or at least I did, that it cost $36 to do an investigation for a purchaser and $28 to do an investigation for someone, a landlord for a renter. Now, fortunately, we have some volunteers. One I mentioned before. Her nickname is Chicky Melendez. She's very good on Excel and can do bookkeeping. So I took several invoices from Scott Roberts, and I had her, and it takes a long time, analyze the charges for each and every investigation. And that's on this schedule that I gave you. And it says, upside down, you can't read it. I got on the left-hand corner on page 118, line 118, it says 114 invoices. Take it to, it looks like this. There were more pages, but I only gave you the last 2 pages. So in the month of December 2019, we did 114 investigations. If you look at the first column C, that is the basic charge that we're paying for the 2 types of investigations, which is the purchaser and the renter, and also sprinkled in there is the charges that we incur for people who live outside the United States. And I think the most salient number, do you have it, Stu, are you looking for it? You got it?
I don't have that sheet. It looks like this, Stu.
I don't have any of them.
I have that, but without the data.
Look at the bottom.
It says 118.
Look, that's where it is. That's the last line. And it says 114 invoices.
Yes. Yeah, that's what I have.
It's here.
Thank you.
And this I just went through. Okay. And I'm saying that the end is really where we're going to look at. And the first column is the ordinary basic expense that we pay. And the majority of them are for purchases, which is the $36.50, and for renters, which is the $29. Now, you see 50 and 50, that's for out of town. That's for out of town, out of the country.
Out of the country?
Out of the country.
$50.
Yes.
Okay, no, I'm just verifying what you're saying, that's all.
I don't know, when you're on my phone now, I can't call you, but you can call me.
Okay, take your time. Now, $50 off the top of my head, when I looked, is the basic charge for anybody who's investigated that comes from Canada.
What about Europe?
Europe has different charges for different countries. Phil will tell you. They go anywhere from 100, and the max has been like 600. And it depends on what country. It depends on what country. But the predominant amount is from the basics. And when you add that up, it was $3,703. What I find is significant is if you look below on line D and go all the way over to L, 121, it totals $3,510. That means that we are being charged within pennies the extra charges that we pay for the normal investigation. And it's broken down. On F, you see $98, that's the charge we talked about before. That's for New York City. Okay? The other charges are miscellaneous charges. So the question becomes, which we raised before, first of all, we need these. Can we do anything about it? Well, the answer is I feel you can. And when I was at the expo, there were other outfits who provide the same service. I spoke to one of them, and my criterion was, Scott Roberts is a very large firm, well known. So the smaller firms I didn't talk to. I didn't go further. But the firm that I have asked to give us an idea, basically, from what they told us and we confirmed, started before 1900. It has a large office in Miami. It has a basis in Texas. And we don't have any comparative numbers yet, but we will get them. And when I asked him, what do you do for out of country? He said, we have quote unquote partners in different countries. Now, I don't know if Scott Roberts has the same thing. However, Scott Roberts, when I looked on their website, says that they have about $1.5 million in gross revenue. This other outfit, which he said he would give us the number, is several times greater. And I think the combined offices, a large office in Miami and several, comes to about 120 employees. Because you want someone that's really good, and hopefully by the next meeting, we'll get some numbers that we can compare. Whether you change or not, that is up in the air, but I think we should get a look at what someone else can provide. Now, I understand, and I wasn't here, and maybe David Bowes knows, because Fausto told me that at one time he brought in an outfit that said they would take over the entire operation, and for a fee. I'm just repeating, maybe you know it, Stuart, but
No, I don't remember that.
but I just felt, and if you look at the agenda, and I had this on before, planning for the internal audit subcommittee. Just like the auditor says he has making some changes, I feel that there has to be changes made too, new people look at it. But in order to really be effective, we have to have a small group of people going through invoices in the past, checking them, not just that the check amount equals the invoice. And a brief example is I checked some of our telephone bills, and I think I mentioned this before. We have phone bills that have 35 hours on the telephone. Now it's gone down a little. However, I was told that at one point the guards from the outside stations were able to make. It's not just the money, it's the time. And I think from experience, when you use as a customer the same vendor without ever checking his metal, every vendor becomes a little comfortable, and it is a worthwhile chore to go through and cherry pick and get other estimates from different vendors to see if we're still getting the best bang for the buck. And I'm asking for volunteers. I have 2 volunteers who have come forward now. One is Chicky Melendez, and the other one, which you may have, is Frank Wizlowski. Chicky has an extensive background in paralegal, and in fact, if you look at her resume, she used to help people do bankruptcies. And Frank has an extensive, he's an engineer with a master's degree, and he has extensive background in IT work. And actually, David looked over his resume and said, they never met, but they worked on the same government projects. And he is excellent in the Excel and reviewing things also. So that's what I'd like to get going. The floor is now open for anybody, for any remarks that you want to make. Anybody have anything to say? That being the case, we all know that we work, and I thank everybody very hard to come to this point. And it may be all for nothing, you may think, but it serves as an exercise if it doesn't get utilized this year going forward, because it's bringing up things that should be corrected and will be corrected. And each of you have the budget sheet, which we've been using, and I'm proposing, and I mentioned it at the beginning, the current difference from last year is an increase of $2.71. As we went through it in the past, the bulk of that is extra allocations to do repairs. So I'd like a motion for someone to call for a vote on the budget. Gene makes the motion. Do I have a
Second it.
We will now do the roll call, and Gene will take the vote. Let us start with our guests, which is a little bit in reverse, which is 3 officers from the Officers Committee.
That's not really how it should be done.
Excuse me?
Committee should always vote first.
It doesn't? I mean, is it, I'm not arguing, is it written somewhere?
Committee should always vote first.
Oh, I have no problem. I don't want to get into that minutia. So I'll start with the youngest member of the team, George Lowenstein.
Thank you. I'm positive.
Now it's up to you to call the roll.
Oh, okay.
George started.
Barbara's not here.
We could call her, she said.
Jean Bell says yes. Bill?
Yes.
Okay, Betty, welcome.
Can't hear you. Turn your
Betty,
mic on.
Betty,
Turn your mic on.
I guess it's me.
is my phone?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. I know, my sight is going and my hearing is going.
All right, Betty, you said yes. Bill? Bill?
Oh, I said yes.
Okay. Betty said yes. Olga?
I said
Yes,
yes.
Marcia?
Yes.
Okay, and Ed?
Yes,
Okay. And, Bob? Bob?
Abstain.
Okay. Stuart?
Yes.
Okay. And David, is that David over there?
Yes.
David, okay. David?
Yes.
Hello, please leave a message after.
All right, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 yeses and 1 abstention, so it passes.
the motion passes,
Yeah.
and tomorrow is the officers' meeting, and as is required, hold on. Americo, we try to reach, well, right now, next time we're gonna have to have a direct line to Canada. We're at the point of voting on the budget, which you have a copy of, and the net difference is $2.71 increase. Everybody has voted. It is now up to you, our Canadian counterpart.
Okay, look at, Ed,
Yeah.
I tried to compare the budget, the 2-page budget that you sent out
Right.
to my last year's cost at the Greenbrier seat, and I find that the last amount, which was, wait a minute, general and administrative expenses of $827.
That's a combination of figures, America.
Yeah, I know, but that doesn't come close to last year's figure.
Well, last year is last year. It may not come close, but we have provided for more than last year.
Well, no, the 271, the 271 increase, I have no argument with that at all.
Well,
I think that's fine.
okay, so the answer is, are you voting yes or no?
Yes,
Okay. I don't want to cut you off. Can you just add that name on, Gene?
Yeah, it's, I've already done it.
It's unfortunate that you haven't heard the accountant. When he finishes his report, we'll have everybody get a complete copy of it, and we'll go back to it. And as far as comments, I made a statement which you may know. We worked very hard. We did what I think is our best but under the current circumstances, it may never reach fruition because of the virus and everything else. So I appreciate your comments, and I would like you to write it. We'll take it up at the next meeting. Thank you. Again, I thank everybody. I thank those officers who have come. I thank Barbara Rivera, who very kindly has photographed some of our meetings. And I mentioned before, I don't know if it was accomplished, we bought a chip that we could go back and review the meetings without having to go to the whole blog, and you have the ability of, on certain programs, of editing it and taking out the superfluous and winding up with what's good. And again, I invite everybody, if you have something that you can contribute, if you have an idea that hasn't been covered, if you go to the bylaws, the Finance Committee is supposed to keep on meeting and monitoring the budget and coming up with ideas. Yes, Jean?
Do you want to approve the minutes even though they're at the end of the...
Oh, yes, I certainly. Go ahead. I'm sorry. We did put
I'm sorry.
the minutes behind us because you weren't here.
I couldn't take it. I couldn't wait. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
All right. Let me get up to the mic. All right, the meeting was opened at 1:25 by Ed Grossman, Chair. Present were committee members Barbara Cornish, Olga Walkenstein, Betty Lee Blickman, Marcia Zaccardi.
Talk a little louder, and could you talk a little slower?
Okay.
Bring the mic
Put
closer.
the mic up close. All right. Marcia Zaccardi, Phil DePaul, and Jean Dowling. Also present was UCO Secretary Bob Rivera and Chris Shepard, UCO bookkeeper. Guest speakers were Sarah Kirkwood and Brooke Lytle from AMR, our ambulance service. Ms. Kirkwood is in charge of contracts and Mr. Lytle is operations manager. We have had a contract with AMR for 20 years, and they are one of the largest providers of ambulance service, as they also provide for FEMA. There has been a reduction of carries due to the pandemic. In the village, the system works as a backup to the fire department, who transport all of the life-threatening patients. Those who can wait are then transported by AMR. AMR also transports between hospital and rehab. The cost per ride is $5,600, with insurance paying part and the amount we pay providing the rest. If someone does not have insurance, there is no cost to the individual. Fire department charges you your insurance and any difference you pay. In some cases, it is $250, but some are higher. An engineering study is to be made for a $7 million irrigation project. Many background checks exceed the $100 fee that the state will allow, especially in New York City boroughs. A discussion was held as to how to collect the extra fee. It was suggested that the building pick up the extra amount. Ed has been working on the bookkeeping system, which needs to be reformed. An abridged copy of the federal income tax was given to all committee members and explained basically what we make money on, we pay tax on, unless the income equals the expense. There was a review of UCO reserves, see attached spreadsheet. Income items were reviewed, and it was noted that the laundry was a wash, as all of the income was spent on the upkeep of the facility. A spreadsheet is attached. There was a long discussion on the excursion buses, with some for and some against. It was suggested that some of the designations may pay for the bus to get the people to their venue. An example was Festival Flea Market or a similar venue. As the time was late, the last items on the agenda were postponed until the next meeting. Next meeting will be held on Wednesday, October the 28th at 2 o'clock in Classroom C. A following meeting will be held on Wednesday, November the 18th at 1 o'clock, recorded by Jean Dowling, Secretary.
Bob has a question.
Jim, what was the amount that you said was charged
For,
for the ambulance? I think you
for the
said
ambulance, it was $5,600 was the total that,
That's
for the
5,000?
5,600.
I don't think that was correct.
That's what they said, it's what the insurance pays, what the insurance pays plus what they collect from the village.
I believe it was 500 and something.
Bob,
560.
Bob,
wait a minute.
could you talk a little louder?
Yeah, I said I believe it was about 500 and something, not 5,000.
560 or
Yeah, it was
something along those
560, and I'm sorry, I read it wrong. It is, yeah, I'm sorry,
Okay.
I read it wrong.
I-
Thank you for
That's not
correcting me.
5,000.
The minutes are right, I was wrong. Thank you.
Any other comments on the minutes?
Move to accept.
Uh,
Do you want to set a-
We should vote on accepting the minutes.
Except,
You just have to ask if there are any corrections.
You gotta talk a little more.
You don't have to have a vote, you just ask if there are corrections, and if there are
I
none, you
won't
just
vote.
accept them.
I have the same privilege in my own house, I can't vote.
Okay.
But I got used to that. Again,
It took a few years, right?
what,
It took a few years.
60 plus.
I know.
I think we've covered a great deal, and as a bonus, we're all going to Wendy's.
The best we can do.
No, all the sodas are on me.
Did you
But
want-
again, thank you all.
Did you want to set another meeting or not?
What?
Do you want to set up another meeting?
Yes,
Then when November?
I think we have one on the schedule.
We
just announced it.
What day is it?
Get my
Wednesday,
schedule out.
November, wait a minute, let me get my glasses on. November the 18th
Yeah.
November
at
18th?
1 o'clock. November 18th.
Would everybody please note that?
I did.
Wednesday, November 18th,
At 1 o'clock.
At 1 o'clock,
same time and same station.
correct.
It's a Wednesday. I gotta
Move
hear-
we adjourn.
I got it here for 10.
Meeting adjourned.
Did someone second
I
that?
second it.
second.
Jean,
Thank you for being on the
Barbara was
phone,
here.
America, I will call you.
I just thought I'd let you know.
Okay. Yeah, I told Ed I
Who would like to go
think
before?
cover that too, because
I can't hear you.
I said, I told Ed I was not going to be here at 1, I thought he had postponed the meeting till 2.
Yeah, well, I thought so too, but
whatever.
I just, it's very difficult and I'm in a lot of pain. And I was gonna take notes for you, but I'm in so much pain.
I'll meet you there, okay?
Hold it, hold it, hold it.
Hey, want to do me
Sadie, hey, get over here.
Don't we have to take the chip out of here?
Gotta turn it off. It's still on.
Oh, thank you.
Come here.